everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Basics Podcast, where Don and I take a deep dive into plant based nutrition. Again, I'm Emily. I am your co host today. I have a background in plant based nutrition coaching and fitness training, and I am here with Dawn.
Yes, so glad to be here. My name's Dawn Hutchins, and I um, am the founder of a company called Veggie Cooking, where we teach plant-based cooking for weight loss, vitality, and long-term health. And then I also have a background in plant-based nutrition, and I'm close to getting my personal training certification that I hope to be able to use within a corporate wellness program that I run. So I'm the director of plant-based nutrition for a large corporation with about 95 locations across the United States. And I just have the benefit of being able to run this amazing plant forward wellness program and then be able to share everything I learn with you guys.
Yeah, it's exciting. We both have a passion for health and nutrition, so we're
Yes.
excited to be here. Last episode, we talked about carbohydrates and fruit. This episode, we're talking about a topic that is often misunderstood, which is fats. So we're gonna dive right in. Dawn, fat can be a really confusing topic. Why do you think so many people feel unsure about it?
It's clear that there's so many differing opinions that come at you in the media, in social media, within popular culture. It is a very confusing topic. So I can definitely understand why people are confused about it.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna say there's so much information we're just being, inundated with on it.
Yes, and just completely polarizing viewpoints.
Oh yeah. I get confused sometimes. I'm like, I know the knowledge, but I'm like, oh my gosh, there's something this is another
Yeah.
thing that confused me. So it
Yeah. Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
But when we think about fat in a whole food plant-based diet, what is the big picture takeaway you want people to come out with?
Within a whole food plant-based diet, it is a lower in fat dietary pattern. That doesn't mean no fat. It just means that we tend to want to use the whole forms of food that are higher in fat. So we would get our fats from maybe an avocado or nuts and seeds or let's see, what else am I missing? Um Soy foods are a little higher in fat.
Yeah.
So, we kind of try to lean into those foods because they have a good balance of fiber and vitamins and nutrients. And a lot of times the whole foods have a lot of water volume in them too.
Yeah, definitely. And
They're
just
nice.
thinking of, where we began with all of these episodes explaining what whole food plant-based eating is. So eating the whole avocado as opposed to avocado oil, not
Mhm.
saying you can't have that, but just being mindful it's being packaged so you get all of those vitamins and nutrients. So
Right, right.
definitely.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at what fat actually is and why it matters. So first, what is fat?
Fat is a macronutrient. So it's part of what you hear as our macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And then within fat, there are different types of fat. So I don't know if we want to get into that a little bit and just the different types and maybe sources so people kind of understand what that is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you don't mind jumping into, the difference between saturated, unsaturated,
Yeah.
trans, I mean, just from a high level. Again, we're not
Yeah.
scientists, we're not
Right.
taking a deep dive in that direction, but just given our knowledge. Yeah, if you want to.
Yes. So saturated fats would be found in animal foods typically, as well as coconut oil and coconut products and palm oil and palm oil products that would be the things that you would probably see in your pantry or on your plate or grocery store more often. Monounsaturated fats are things like avocado oil and avocados and olive oil. And then polyunsaturated fats would be your maybe sunflower seed oil or canola oil. And um, yeah, those would be some examples of those. And then trans fats would be really highly processed fats that you really don't see anymore because a lot of those have been removed from highly processed food products that made these foods very shelf stable.
Thank goodness. Yeah, yeah. I guess we're
Yeah.
heading in that direction. So yeah,
Yes.
trans fat, not as much of a thing we have to worry about. And you kind of touched on this, but if you don't mind going in a little bit deeper in how fat changes the calorie density of food. So obviously we had an episode where we talked about calorie density. So we have that awareness now. How does fat change that?
So the one thing that we have to be aware of when we're thinking about macronutrients is that fat has more than twice the calories per whatever the volume of weight is. So per gram, twice the calories of a carbohydrate or a protein. And so for carbohydrates and proteins, they each have 4 calories per gram, and then fat has 9 calories.
That's a big
So for the same amount of weight, it's much higher in calorie density.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say that's a drastic difference, so just
Yeah.
something to be mindful of. Again, like you said, you don't have to cut it out altogether, but
Hmm.
having that awareness because those calories are going to add up a lot quicker.
Hmm. Yeah.
So one thing people hear a lot in plant-based nutrition is whole food fat.
Yeah.
So what does that actually mean?
That is along the lines of what we talked about previously, where you're really thinking of instead of the avocado oil, eating some avocado instead of maybe like an olive oil, eating olives, or we will talk a little bit more about saturated fat in a minute, but really leaning into those food forms. So have some walnuts, have some chia seeds, some sunflower seeds, add things like that. But one thing to keep in mind is that we tell people this in our wellness program, that if one of your goals is weight loss, just because of that calorie density, be really aware of the amount you're eating. So we don't advocate for counting calories,
Yeah,
measuring, counting fat grams, carbs, protein. We just have people fill up on the low calorie dense but high nutrient dense foods. And then if you're really worried about the weight loss part, measuring out the fats. So
mm,
instead of eating a whole avocado, you might want to eat a quarter of an avocado. Instead of just a lot of participants will realize when we're talking about fat, they'll have one of those big Costco size containers of nuts on their desk thinking this is a really healthy snack, and it is. However, it's really easy to eat because a lot of times they've added salt, that sometimes they even add additional oil, and
yeah,
they're not realizing they could be eating hundreds and hundreds of extra calories and grams of fat. And it is filling, but you really want to balance it out with foods that are high in water and fiber.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense, just having that balance, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the nuts there because that is one that I mean, that's one especially that can add up quickly because if you
Yes.
look at what it's like a quarter of a cup a lot of
Quarter of
times,
a cup.
means that's
I
hardly
mean, it's
anything.
so tiny. And
Mhm.
I think people are just in meetings and they're just snacking mindlessly. I mean, you could easily go through a cup and a half sometimes, and people are just blown away when they realize, "Oh my gosh, this just being aware of this could
Yeah.
make a huge impact and cut out hundreds of calories." We definitely had somebody in one of our wellness programs that was eating like a cup and a half throughout the day, not realizing. Oh my gosh, it was so easy to just be snacking, and they're so tasty with the salt. And another way we have people kind of slow themselves down is to get the unsalted, and
That's a
or if you want to just do like mix half and half, slowly start bringing that salt down, and you're going to find it's just
not
as
as satisfying,
not
yeah.
as satisfying. There's something about the salt that makes you want to keep eating it.
Yeah, just like potato chips, different,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
similar, and or
Yeah.
even just measuring out ahead of time, which I know can be
Yes.
boring, and we're saying you
Yeah.
don't have to necessarily
Right.
count everything, but that is one instance where if you want a snack, just measure it out into Tupperware, because I
Yeah.
mean, you're saying like a cup and a half, that could have gotten upwards of like 1,000 calories, like half calories a day.
Yes.
Sneaky.
And it just being aware of if you're making a smoothie, adding nut butter in there, and I see a lot of plant-based desserts that are made. They're delicious, but they're typically made with nut butter
Yeah.
and, then a bunch of maybe maple syrup, and they end up being just very calorie dense, kind of like fat bombs. And I think people don't realize that if you eat like 4 of them, that could be an extra 500, 600 calories.
Yeah, yeah, it adds up quickly. And
Yeah.
and that's a good lead into the next question I have for you are sneaky foods that can really add up in fat. I know I have one off the top of my head, dressing. Um,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
is one. I mean, when you cut out the dairy, that does help, but there's still a lot of
Yes.
oil-based dressings. I know, like, my husband tries to be mindful of that, and it's like, we'll be at the grocery store, and most of the grocery store dressings and sauces and dressings, it's like they're very high in calories, very high in fat, or it'll look like it's like a tablespoon. It's like, who's putting a tablespoon, which is something we kinda talked about in a past episode, but it's like, what are
Yep.
some other things that are sneaky that the audience should be aware of?
So some other things to think about are trail mix. A lot of our participants love to have trail bags of trail mix on their desk. And then when they read the label, they realize, oh my gosh, this is just as calorie dense as eating the bags of nuts. Um, Restaurant foods, so the amount of salt and fat they put in restaurant foods is crazy. I've ordered some things that I thought were gonna be plant-based, and they're just drowning in oil, and it to the point where it just I'm not really sure why they do it. It's so much, I think it takes away from the food.
Yeah.
Um, some of the vegan processed foods, like ice cream, can be pretty calorie dense and high in fat, and, the nut butters like we talked about, and of course, like you said, that salad dressing is, definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, definitely. And then as far as like swaps, we can talk about healthy swaps for people or suggestions. I know just
Yeah.
because you just ended with the nut butter one I've swapped out recently, and this I think I mean knew of it, but talked I mean off podcast months ago, and you were talking about the peanut butter powder, and I was like,
Yes,
especially the naked one because there's nothing else in it. So
yeah,
I've been doing that in my smoothies, and I've switched to the naked peanut butter powder. So it's like getting I think a gram more of peanut butter, but half the calories, way less fat,
yeah,
um, which is great. I mean, I would rather I'll still have peanut butter later in the
yeah,
day at
yeah,
times because I love peanut butter and
me
mine's
too.
but it's like I don't want I still want that peanut butter in the shake and I
Right,
want it later. So it's like
yeah,
you kinda pick and choose. But what other
yeah.
swaps do you have for
I
us?
do, and I will say, like, I add the peanut butter powder to my oatmeal, but whereas I used to take peanut butter and drizzle it over, and you'll see a lot of plant-based influencers do this, where
Yeah,
they
yeah,
might be drizzling a quarter cup over, and it looks amazing, and I'm sure tastes amazing, but if you want the peanut butter flavor, and it's high in protein, high in fiber, um, you're not getting the fat,
mhm,
and it's such a good swap to use as the peanut butter powder. Um, I'm trying to think, other things that we can do are if you're snacking on the nuts, like I said, balancing it out with a whole apple or some carrots, making like a little like mini charcuterie almost thing with like vegetables and some fruits and a little bit of nuts. So you're really enjoying the nuts and you're
mhm.
snacking, but you're getting maybe some crunchy carrots and a crisp apple. So something a little sweet, something a little salty. So that's kind of a fun thing to do. We have some amazing dressing recipes that don't have oil. So one of the favorites is the Esselstyn 321 dressing. So it's just 3 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar, 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard, and a tablespoon of maple syrup. Everybody loves it, and you can make so many variations on it, and you really don't miss the oil in it.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm gonna have to try
It's
that.
really
Something
good.
I mean, I feel like I've maybe heard it before, but I'm always looking for a healthy dressing, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'll get like light balsamic vinegar from the
Yep.
store vinaigrette,
Yep.
from the store, and it's like reading the back, it's like, it's still
So
not.
many things.
Yeah,
So
and
many, like, so many ingredients.
yeah, and in a pinch, like, I'm going to cook out and I wanna have a dressing and I don't have time to
Yep.
make one or so I'll still use it, but it's just like, if I can have something healthier and I do have a little bit of time, it's worth it. I mean, overall, making those shifts towards making the food rather than buying something, usually does help, so
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also, if you're gonna use, say, olive oil on something, I measure it out, and I usually need way less than I would have just guzzled it over before, and now I just can measure out a little bit. I really love if you go to those olive oil and vinegar stores, they have those really beautiful balsamic vinegars. So I got this Gala apple one, I got a Florida citrus one, and they're thick and they're so delicious. And you
Oh,
can drizzle those over, and then if you do wanna add a little bit of olive oil, I just measure out, like, I do a teaspoon, because I'm always trying to just keep my fats lower,
yeah, yeah.
because of that calorie density, um, thing.
That's smart. I feel like I've gotten so many tips already with 3,
Yeah.
2, 1, and then going. I mean, it's been forever since I've seen those stores, but it's like I just think, "Oh, no, I don't need anything
Yeah.
from here," but quality, I mean, it's worth it, and
Yeah.
like the apple and the citru I'm like, "Ooh, that sounds good."
Yeah, and it really makes it exciting. I mixed, an Italian herb, um, ball olive oil, so I just it's so flavorful, I just needed, like, a teaspoon, and
Mm,
then I mixed it with somehow it went great with this Florida citrus one, it was delicious, so
wow,
I have a lot of fun trying now the vinegars, whereas I used to just, try all the oils and be dipping bread and eating tablespoons and tablespoons of oil, not realizing I probably just consumed 600 calories extra, and now just being more mindful
yeah.
about just that one thing makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. And like you're saying, when, backtracking a question or two, when you're going out, you don't have that control usually. Sometimes you
Right.
say, "Hey, can you not use oil?" But
Yep.
there's a lot more control when you cook at home. Not saying that you can never eat out, but usually you can
Yes.
monitor things better at home.
Yeah, such a good point.
Yeah, but I wanna take a pivot. So I know this can be a little bit controversial online. I've seen so much information about this, but from, the simple perspective here, how
Mhm.
does fat relate to insulin resistance?
We have found that reducing saturated fat
Mhm.
helps improve insulin sensitivity. So, in our wellness program, as people start reducing their fat, especially the saturated fat, it really helps improve that insulin sensitivity and decrease insulin resistance as people are getting towards type 2 diabetes. And there are a lot of strategies that you can use if you're worried about glucose spikes and things like that, which I think we talked about in a previous episode,
Yeah,
in the fruit episode and the carbohydrate episode, but also reducing the fats and saturated fats, which this is not a very prominent in our, medical community. It's really a focus on decreasing carbohydrates, but
yeah.
what we found really works well to we're not as we're, of course, worried about the glucose spike, but, um, we're actually really interested in improving insulin sensitivity.
Yeah.
So instead of just thinking about dampening the curve, we're thinking how can we keep things more even
Mhm.
all the time and not have to worry as much about the spikes. And that's where I'm saying just keeping in mind decreasing that fat has been really beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. And I know what like digging into nutrition when I was in my nutrition course and learning about like what you're saying, I was like, I've always heard it's carbs, and it's like, oh,
Right.
eye-opening that it's fats, and I mean, that
Mhm.
changes the game completely, and,
Right.
we talked about carbs last episode, that they're not the villain here. Simple ones, yes, they're still the villain, but the complex carbs, we really need those, and it gives us
Right.
energy and stuff, so,
Yeah.
just having that understanding. Before we wrap up here, what are your tips on, I guess, building, and it kinda goes back to building the healthy plate episode, but what's your advice for being mindful and building a healthy plate as it relates to fat and everything
Yeah,
we talked about.
yeah, I think, just staying focused on building that healthy plate around half being fruits and vegetables, so loading up as much as you want on the fruits and vegetables, having your whole food carbohydrates. So, as we know, not all carbs are created equal. So, we're not really counting fries or white rice or anything. We're really counting the whole food forms of carbohydrate. And then having your protein as a quarter of the plate. And of course, if you can focus on lean proteins, I mean, we just love legumes,
Mhm.
so high in protein and low in fat and high in fiber. And
Yes.
then, of course, your soy foods. So, tofu, tempeh, edamame are amazing options for the soy foods. And then, if you want to add some fat, add it as Plant Strong kind of calls it a spark. So they might do a bunch of vinegars and things like that, but they might do a tahini-based dressing, which is a sesame seed paste. That would be a little bit higher in fat, or adding just a little bit of walnuts or a little bit of sunflower seeds. Some pumpkin seeds are a great source of zinc.
Yeah.
Um, so just being mindful as you're adding those, but they're amazing sources of vitamins and minerals too. So if you're making some kind of Mexican dish, having the black beans, and then if you're gonna do avocado, instead of loading up like cheese and sour cream and things like that, having your fat be from some avocado or a little bit of guacamole, so delicious. And
Mhm.
that's a whole food form, which is amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Low and it's some monounsaturated fat instead of saturated fat. So that is beneficial for your heart health.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. I guess to add on to that, just thinking, again, piggybacking off what you said, nothing super new here, but like when you're building your plate and when you're eating the food, just thinking about when you're getting the fat, because now you have the more awareness on what the sources are. Think
Yes.
of what else am I getting from it? So, like you're saying, the pumpkin seeds, the walnuts, you're getting there's a lot of walnuts. I mean, that's a great source of a ton of other antioxidants. So it's like we're not villainizing it, but it's like if you're adding just straight oil, what are you getting from that? But if you're
Right.
adding the walnuts, the pumpkin seeds, the avocado, there's a lot of other things there. So I guess
Yeah.
doing the little reality check might be a good task this week or this next month for listeners. When you're eating something with fat, because now you know it does have it, you're thinking, what else am I getting from it? And if it's nothing but the calories and the fat, maybe second guess it or just keep it very, very minimal. I mean,
Yeah.
have treats here and there, but
Right.
thinking
Yeah.
of nourishing our bodies, yay.
Yeah, and I think it's we're not wanting to vilify anything. So, but we're always wanting to kind of think, what are our health goals and as compared to what?
Yeah,
So, whereas I used to probably guzzle the oil over things, now I might eat more of the whole food forms because of that awareness. Like you said, I'm thinking, okay, well, what else does this avocado ride along with? What else does this walnut ride along with? And so I can eat these delicious foods, and then they also have these other health benefits. But
yeah.
sometimes I will have a little bit of olive oil. Sometimes I might even have a little coconut. I mean, don't tell
Going
anyone.
crazy.
Yeah. But I try to keep it minimal
It's
because I wanna keep my saturated fat low,
yeah,
but, and just keeping that focus on we're adding in the foods that are the whole food forms of fat, and
yeah.
just having an awareness around it is really the key.
Yes, definitely. We only get one body. We have to
Yeah.
take care of it. Yes, there are a lot of medicines and shots and everything else you can get, but at the end of the day, just like a car, like the better you take care of your body, the better it will perform and the happier and healthier you'll be. So
Yes. So true. So true.
definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Next episode, we will be talking about another somewhat controversial, I feel like gaining controversy as we speak, protein. So
Yeah.
stay tuned. Can you eat plant based protein and survive? Ooh, I mean, I'm pretty sure you can guess yes because we are both plant based, but stay tuned. We're going to take a deep dive into protein, help you understand it more, and just continue to give you guys the knowledge you need to be educated eaters. So thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.